Welcome to Psych 265 online. We're going to talk today about psychology as a science. So this is kind of the introduction chapter to the course. So there are a couple of aspects of psychology as a science that I'm going to cover with you. Why research methods are important versus kind of anecdotal evidence or listening to an authority figure, etc. We'll also talk about characteristics of a good scientist and then the goals of the scientific method. So some of this will be review for you. So here's something to think about. What's the best way to figure out what a person is really like? So let's say we're interested in doing a research project on this, or we're interested in answering this question. There's a variety of ways to sort of go about doing this. Some are better than others. For example, like if you're choosing a new roommate, and this is a difficult situation in many of our lives because when you go to college and you dorm, and I know that I dormed when I went to college, they ask you to fill out, questionnaires, or they ask you various questions, and they try to match you up with your perfect roommate. And so let's say that you were trying to match someone up with their perfect roommate. How would you do this? Unfortunately, a lot of the procedures they use to match you up, these procedures err a lot of times. You end up with a disastrous roommate like I did when I first went off to college, and we didn't get along at all, and it was difficult. But there's a variety of ways to sort of look into this topic of how to pick the perfect roommate from a group of strangers. So what's the best strategy for selecting someone? We could use possibly handwriting analysis. Well, this is really a great idea to pick your perfect roommate out through, excuse me, handwriting analysis, but we could do this. And some people really believe in handwriting analysis. And so you could look at how they write their name, and if there's no slant, they tend to be very logical, non-emotional people. If they write their name with a slant to the right, they tend to be more friendly or impulsive, and they value family and friends. Or if they write their name to the left, they are said to be more introspective and reserved, or more me-oriented. So some people have actually looked at handwriting analysis to determine certain personality traits, and obviously this is not a good method, but there are plenty of people that have done research in this area and they really believe in it. So this is a limited practice because there's not a lot of research and full empirical research that supports this, although you'll see it online a lot. So this is kind of akin to pseudoscience. Pseudoscience is when you have an idea that you believe works, but you don't have the scientific evidence to back it up, or you have very weak scientific evidence. And one of the traditional measures, or traditional fields, I should say, of pseudoscience was phrenology. So if you go back a couple hundred years, you had people feeling a person's skull to determine their personality or characteristics about themselves. And so they could tell if you were overly logical, if you were friendly, if you were highly emotional by just feeling the bumps on your skull. This is not really a good analysis of someone's personality because there's no research that backs this up. So pseudoscience is basically any kind of scientific method that is not rooted in data collection of some kind and fully empirically validated theories, which means basically you do the scientific method, you use the scientific method to test your idea. Anybody can have an idea, anyone can have a theory, but if you don't collect data to either test that theory or test the hypotheses that you generate, that theory is called pseudoscience. And there's lots of pseudoscience out there. People still believe in, horoscopes and all those things, but there's no data to support those beliefs that are dictated by these pseudoscientific fields. So we have to think differently about how to conduct research. So a research methods course and obviously a statistics course as well focus on knowing how to test ideas. So our research methods course is going to talk about what is the best way to measure certain variables, what is the best way to test our hypotheses, what is the best way to collect data. And there's a variety of ways to do this versus a statistics course, which looks at purely data-driven, quantitative mainly driven ways of answering a question. And if you've taken statistics before, you know it's about looking at numbers. You may not know what those numbers are for. You may know the basic concepts within statistics, but you don't know how to apply statistics to real life. A research method course will teach you how to apply statistics to real life. So these kind of courses complement each other, excuse me, and you have to use them to sort of complement each other. So if you haven't taken a stats course, I could recommend taking my stats course at some point if you're still going to be around. But if you move to the four-year college, you can obviously take a stats course there. So research methods and stats go together. One important principle of research to realize is that researchers do not rely on their gut instincts. They use the scientific method to find the truth. So we're not going to be talking about, I feel this is the way of the world, or based on my anecdotal evidence, this is the way the world works, or I have a gut feeling that this is how it's going to work. All of those things are okay on a very basic emotional level, but this is not a good way to conduct research. The best way to conduct research is to use the scientific method and to structure your research design and systematically test it instead of just taking shortcuts and relying on introspection or what I feel or my gut feeling. That's not to say the gut feeling is wrong, but the gut feeling a lot of times isn't backed by any evidence other than the emotions you feel in a given situation. And the gut feeling tends to be wrong on a lot of occasions. So we need to use something more systematic than just sort of a gut introspective analysis. One way of making decisions or testing ideas in everyday life is to use heuristics. And heuristics are useful most of the time, but we don't want to use heuristics to sort of draw firm conclusions because we do make errors with heuristics. The first heuristic that we use on a regular basis is the availability heuristic, which is a mental shortcut strategy for judging the likelihood of an event or situation occurring based on how easily we can think of a similar or relevant instance. We also use the representative heuristic, which is a mental shortcut strategy for deciding the likelihood of an event based on how much it resembles what we consider to be a typical example of that event. Using heuristics is not necessarily a bad thing because they help us become overwhelmed. So there's so much information in our environment that it would kind of overload us. So we use these shortcuts, these heuristics, to cut down on the sort of information overload, and it helps us make quick, fast, and hopefully accurate decisions. The problem is that sometimes heuristics go wrong, and when they go wrong, they go really wrong. And we make some horrible judgments and stereotypes and biased decisions that are not based on data. They're not based in the scientific method. We're not really aware of the limitations of these heuristics because they've been partly ingrained into who we are. We use them almost automatically. We're not thinking of my idea is wrong. It just kind of pops into our head and we go with it. So here is the availability heuristic and why it can go wrong sometimes. For example, it's very easy to recall plane crashes. It's very hard to recall safe flights. Why is it easy to recall plane crashes? Because we see them on the news. A plane catches on fire, so we think that the planes aren't safe. Or there's an emergency landing, so we're like, I'm not going to fly that airline. And in reality, we're wrong because there's thousands upon thousands of flights that go perfectly fine. We just remember the real disastrous flight and we become afraid to then get on either that airline or to fly in general. So this is an instance where the availability heuristic is causing a problem for us. It's making an error because flights are very safe. They're safer than driving. But since we see the crashes and the incidents on the news, we kind of become afraid. We overrepresent the dangers of getting in a plane. Cold spell. It's very easy to recall, right? It's hard to recall global warming. So, this leads us to ignore climate change. Now, some of us can actually look at the scientific evidence for climate change and we're saying, oh, well, there's evidence here to support climate change and the data is there and the melting of the polar ice caps is there. This is all legitimate information to support the idea of climate change. But then you have climate deniers that say, well, there's been instances in the past, going back decades or hundreds of years that have been very similar to our current situation. So they say that the climate isn't changing, it's just a cycle of weather that we're going through. And so they'll ignore all the other information because they're comforted by the fact that we may have an extreme batch of weather that has occurred in the past. They'll ignore the melting ice caps. They'll ignore the unstable changes in weather or the increase in storms that we've been seeing. And they feel better saying, oh, there's no climate change. And we don't have to change the use of fossil fuels and coal and all these things because it's just a cycle of weather that we're in. Also, the availability heuristic really hurts us when it comes to lottery tickets. And people are obsessed with lottery tickets. I don't understand why they're obsessed with lottery tickets, but they think they're going to win. A dollar in a dream. I like to call lottery a tax on people who can't do math because the probability is so low that you're going to win and you're wasting so much money playing. But, the dollar in a dream or it can happen to anyone or why not me? That sort of mentality, along with the availability heuristic, keeps people buying tickets. For instance, you buy a ticket and you win. You win some money. Maybe you win $100. And you think to yourself, I'm lucky. I have this, I was given a gift. I won the lottery. I'm going to keep playing, right? And it's harder to recall all the other tickets that you lost on. So maybe you lost on your first 20 lottery tickets and you won on the 21st. And so when you go about, thinking about should I play the lottery, you say, oh, okay, I won. So of course I'm going to play again. And maybe you did win. Maybe you did win $100, $200, $500, $1,000 one time, maybe twice. All the other lottery tickets were losers, but you don't remember the losers. You only remember the winners. And that kind of motivates you to buy more. And the lottery people know this. They just want you to win just enough to keep buying the tickets, right? So they know how to sort of stoke your interest, drive your interest. And this is all the fault of the availability heuristic. The representative heuristic looks at what is typical of a given situation. And following 9/11, this caused many, many problems. For instance, is this man a terrorist? So using the representative heuristic following 9/11, this led to stereotyping some men with beards as dangerous. Well, the terrorists had beards. This man has a beard, therefore he could be a terrorist. That's kind of fresh in my mind what a terrorist looks like. And so when asked to judge, is this man a terrorist or a hipster? There's a much higher probability that this guy is a hipster with a long beard than a terrorist. But if you ask people following 9/11, they look at this man and they say, he looks like a terrorist. Forget about a hipster. He's got a beard. He must be a terrorist. And the reason is because we represented the image of the terrorist as a man having a long beard. Now, that's not accurate. That's not how the world works. I mean, I personally have a long beard. I don't consider myself a terrorist. And hopefully no one else considers me a terrorist. But there was so much anxiety after 9/11, and Some of you may not remember 9/11 because you're too young to really recall it. But following 9/11, the country was just in absolute shock, and they were looking for enemies. You were looking for enemies wherever you went. You thought that terrorists would strike anywhere. And so people saw the long beard and they said terrorist, and they would call the security on the planes, and the plane, security would come in and throw people off of planes and interview them because they looked like a terrorist. And so this is an example where beards got a lot of men in trouble, long beards, and that's because they represented the terrorist concept of terrorist. But in fact, the representative heuristic made an error here because the true probability of a long-bearded man being a terrorist is very low. There's a much higher chance of this person being a hipster. So these heuristics represent some of the natural flaws in thinking, and there's additional natural flaws in thinking that we all make. So we don't intentionally make errors, but we just make errors because it kind of simplifies the world. We're not perfect. We're human beings. We make mistakes in logic. We don't think like computers. For example, the better than average effect. We tend to overestimate our skills and our performance in comparison to those of other people. So the average person thinks they're above average. No one wants to consider themselves average or below. It's average sounds like such a horrible thing to people. Like, I'm of average intelligence. That just sounds terrible, right? But in reality, average is 50th percentile. It's the median. That means half the people are above you and half the people are below you. But it's kind of hard for human beings to think of themselves as average, even though statistically, there are many average and below average people. You don't want to be the person that says, I have average looks, right? That sounds like, no one's going to date you. No one's interested in you. You have average looks, or I'm below average. People want to think of themselves as above average. And there may be a benefit to this. I mean, it's kind of like it keeps us from feeling bad about ourselves. It keeps us motivated. I don't want to wallow in self-pity by thinking I'm average or below average. If I think I'm above average, that keeps me motivated to pursue my goals. Then we have overconfidence. This is our ability to be too confident or too correct in our own judgments. So we feel that we can take on more than we should. We feel we're more prepared than we are. And you see this in exam taking. Hopefully I don't see it in the class, right? Because you should be very prepared for the exams and for the papers. But a lot of times you see people that say, I studied for, an hour and a half. I'm confident. I'm ready for the exam. And then they get the exam, they're like, oh, whoa, what's going on here? They're like, why did I do this? I'm not ready. So, students need to fight this overconfidence effect that you're not really prepared, or if you think you're prepared, prepare some more because you're not totally prepared. So overstudy rather than understudy. Same thing with job interviews. Make sure you're really, really prepared. Don't just feel good about it. If you feel good, prepare some more because we tend to overestimate our abilities. Some other flaws in thinking include hindsight bias. This is the I knew it all along phenomenon. So you didn't get the job and you say to yourself, oh, I knew I wasn't going to get that job. I knew these other people were more qualified, or I knew my interview went, not according to plan. Or if you're going to try to pursue a romantic relationship and you ask that person out somewhere that you're interested in and they reject you, you tell yourself, oh, well, I knew it wouldn't work out with this person anyway because we're not compatible. So you're trying to kind of rationalize why you failed or rationalize the decision that you made. And we do this quite often. This kind of helps us make feel good about ourselves as well. Hindsight bias. Then we have confirmation bias. This is where we look for evidence to confirm what we originally believe. And this can cause problems because if we have a preconceived notion or an idea in our head, we're going to look for evidence to support it. So let's say you don't feel good about yourself. You feel that, you know, you're a failure in a variety of ways. You're going to look for evidence to confirm that you're a failure, and it's going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. This evidence confirms that I'm not good at this, or that I'm a failure in a certain way, and then that's going to then lead to problematic behavior that's going to confirm you're a failure again in the future. And it becomes a vicious, self-fulfilling prophecy that you can't get out of. And you see this with people with depression. They see the world negatively. They look for negative information to confirm their previous beliefs, and that keeps them in this cycle of depression or anxiety. So confirmation bias is something you have to break free of, and if you're a scientist, you have to avoid. Don't just look for evidence to confirm your hypothesis. You have to be objective about the evidence. We also have the focusing effect, where we focus on a single action or behavior as the cause of an event rather than looking at all the factors involved. So I failed the task because of this particular situation or this particular fact. Well, no, you're focusing on one thing when in fact there's many factors involved in either success or failure along the way. So if you're trying to figure out why you don't have the life that you want to live, or that you're a pretty miserable person, it's not just one thing. We tend to focus on one thing, but it's probably a variety of factors that are making you a miserable human being rather than one factor involved. And if you change that factor, it doesn't change your whole reality. For example, you may feel I'm miserable because I didn't get into the college I wanted to, or I didn't get into the grad school that I wanted to, or I'm not intelligent enough. And then you work really hard at fixing that one factor, and that's a good thing to fix, right? But that's not the whole reason for why you're miserable. Or I'm miserable because I don't have a relationship. That you work really hard on getting a relationship and you're still miserable. And your relationship is miserable and you're not happy. And you kind of look at yourself and say, well, this is why I was miserable because I didn't have the relationship that I wanted. And now that I have it, why am I still miserable? Well, because you focus too much on one event rather than looking at all the reasons why you're miserable. And so human beings tend to kind of pigeonhole or focus on single events rather than looking at the whole picture. A lot of other mistakes or non-scientific ways of looking at the world involve looking within the self to gain knowledge and using that self-knowledge to make decisions or to draw conclusions. And one way we do this is through introspection, which is, sort of thinking about our thoughts and feelings and experiences as evidence for a particular idea. So this is anecdotal information. So I have an idea of how the world works based on my own experiences. Well, your experiences may be unique. They may not be typical to the general population that you're interested in studying. So when you're relying on anecdotal evidence, your evidence may be biased. Also, the what you see is all there is phenomenon, where you make quick decisions, judgment based on limited evidence. This is the idea of first impressions. So you meet someone right away, you determine, I like this person, I think highly of them, or I don't like this person. And this can lead to halo effect. The halo effect is what is beautiful is good. So let's say you meet someone that you're very, very attracted to, you attribute all kinds of good things to them. You've made this quick judgment and said, wow, this person is wonderful, this person is highly intelligent, this person is great in every way. Well, you don't know this. You looked at the person, you found them attractive, and then you attributed all these other positive attributes to them. So, this idea of judging a book by its cover, right? First impressions go a long way, but a scientist doesn't rely on first impressions. A scientist wants to do a comprehensive analysis. A human being, unfortunately, is more limited, and they judge right away. Within a few minutes of talking to someone, this person is someone that interests me, this person is someone I want to know, or this person is someone that's highly intelligent, etc., versus I want nothing to do with this person. And you see this in the dating world with speed dating, which we're going to talk about later in the course. I meet the person for 5 minutes and then I move on. And this is kind of silly. Some people say it works, but can you really get to know someone in less than 5 minutes? Probably not. You also have a problem with something called the pleasure paradox. So this is when you're overthinking about a particular topic. So the more you analyze something, the less reasons you find for liking it. So it's kind of what I call paralysis by analysis. So you're thinking about, wow, I really like my new job, and there's so many, the flexibility and the hours and my colleagues, and it really fits my skill set. And you start thinking about it and thinking about why you like it, why you like it, why you like it. And the more you think about why you like it, obviously you find criticisms of this, and eventually you like it less. So sometimes it's not important to analyze why you like something, because the more you think about why you like something, you're going to find criticisms of that thing that you originally liked. And that's just common human nature. We're looking for problems in the real world, and we're analyzing things to death. And if we analyze things to death, we tend to find reasons for probably not liking. You say, oh, well, I kind of liked it at the beginning, but then I thought more about it, and I'm kind of critical of certain things now. So, for our own good, sometimes it's better just to be happy with something and not try to find all the reasons or sort of analyze the situation to death. Just kind of be happy and kind of leave it at that. But we tend to sort of engage in this constant analysis that tends to make us feel more and more miserable or more and more displeased about certain situations in our life. So if we're comparing anecdotal and scientific evidence, we know that we tend to overvalue our personal experience, which is anecdotal evidence, when drawing conclusions about some idea we're testing in the real world. We tend to look at certain outcomes, maybe only a handful of outcomes. So this is what's called a small sample. And the small sample is not necessarily the most accurate view of the real world. So anecdotal evidence generally occurs in small samples. Like, I remember the time that this happened to me, so therefore this is the way the world is. Not necessarily. Maybe this event only happened to you once, twice, a handful of times, and that's going to lead you to a biased conclusion. Maybe this is related to an outlier. These are data points that are atypical. They're exceptions to the rule. Maybe this event that happened to you was atypical, and now you're trying to draw conclusions about the general state of the world or whatever particular problem you're looking at analyzing. You're basing it on only a small number of data points that may not be typical. They're outliers. Sometimes people have very negative events happen to them, and these may be outliers, but that distorts their view of the world. And that shapes the hypotheses that they're, trying to study or investigate, and shapes their conclusions that they draw. So beware of small samples, because they're more prone to the influence of the outliers. Outliers are atypical data points, extreme data points, kind of misfit data points. And you have to be careful with these because they can alter the conclusions from your analysis, whether that analysis is anecdotal or whether that analysis is through data-driven process, numerical or quantitative analysis. So we should always use the scientific method, a systematic approach to addressing a question of interest. This is the best method for evaluating information. We want to think like a scientist, not just rely on our own experiences, not rely on the experience of other people or an authority figure. You need to do a systematic approach to answer questions. And that's what we're going to learn to do in this course. So characteristics of a good scientist include skepticism. You don't believe things at face value, you question things. You should always question. Where's the data before you believe in something? Open-mindedness. Be willing to pursue controversial ideas. Keep an open mind to everything, even if it's something you originally don't believe in. You have to be sort of amenable to it. You have to keep it as an acceptable alternative. So do not be closed-minded about your beliefs. If the data don't fit your original ideas, your hypotheses, you must be willing to change. Be objective. Do not be prejudiced or biased. If you're a scientist, you cannot be biased. You cannot look for evidence to confirm your beliefs. That's confirmation bias. You cannot be prejudiced in how you look at the data. Even if the data go against everything you ever believed in, you cannot be biased in how you analyze it. You must obtain knowledge systematically. This is what's called an empirical approach or empiricism, rather than just through introspection or anecdotes. So we will not use anecdotes in any of the research that we're conducting. We're always going to use a systematic research strategy that involves interviews, surveys, experiments, etc. And you must be creative. You may need to use novel experimental approaches to study behavior. It's not just good enough to use surveys or whatnot. You need to use novel approaches. And finally, we must communicate our results, publish our results in journals and conferences. Even results that don't go according to plan, you should publish them. So publishing things that don't work out for you, that are not significant, you need to publish them. And then finally, replicate. This is a problem where we must repeat a study with different participants. I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it's a process. So if you get a result with your sample, you need to then get different people and get the same result. If you get the same result with different people, you're more confident in your original results. So please try to replicate as much as possible. Psychology is having a problem replicating. That means that other people are conducting the same research design and they're not getting the same results. And that's kind of hurting psychology as a field. So we need to be even more cognizant of the need to replicate to make sure that these findings in psychology are real. They're legitimate. They're not due to outliers. They're not due to just a strange sample. They're real and they hold up across time and different samples. So the next topic is distinguishing between basic and applied research. Basic research looks to expand our knowledge. It's to answer a question, answer the why, what, and how. So how does this particular topic, how does it work? This phenomenon that we're studying, how does it work? It doesn't have immediate objectives. It doesn't have immediate commercial objectives. That means we're not looking to like sell a product. We're not looking to design an intervention. We're just looking to figure out how this particular topic works. How do we, memorize things? Not how do we improve memory, not how do we develop an intervention to improve memory, but just how does memory work? So this is not going to result in an intervention. Basic research does not involve interventions or does not involve improvements. It just tries to understand the basic process of how things work. Applied research looks at interventions, and generally these interventions are monetized. That means people create a program, an intervention, and then they charge for it. So you could improve your memory by taking this course, and that course is applied research. It's about designing something to improve, an intervention to improve a particular behavior or a particular phenomenon under study. So when you're just learning how things work, that's basic research. When you're trying to apply the research to everyday life and even try to sell the intervention, that's applied research. So we need both basic and applied research to truly understand a phenomenon and know how to deal with a phenomenon, increase it, design a treatment for an illness, etc. So they both work hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Finally, careers in psychology. So you're taking a research method course. You may be wondering why you're taking it. Well, these kind of skills that you gain in courses like research methods and statistics are transferable to the real world. So no matter what job you have, you can do a lot of things with it, with this kind of skill set. And so some of the careers in psychology, besides being a psychologist or being clinician or a clinical social worker, involve professional services, working in IT departments, working in offices, financial services. So using your ability to interpret data and do research, that's very important in financial services. Working within education, whether that be school psychology, whether that be administration within education, health services, so any kind of allied health field. And there's plenty of other jobs as well. So a psychology degree is flexible, and the knowledge that you gain through research methods and statistics is transferable to so many different careers. Uh, you are going to be a very valuable employee if you understand how to do research. You will sort of break the tie with other people when looking for a job. It's going to be a tiebreaker because people value this. Because almost every field uses research, and every field looks at data. So you need to sort of develop those skills to make yourself the most marketable that you can be. So this course helps in a wide variety of careers, including clinical work. So if you go into clinical work, you still need research methods. You're still going to have to take research methods and statistics. I keep throwing in and statistics because research methods and statistics go together. You really need both, and you'll have both by the time you get to the 4-year college. And sort of evaluating information, learning good from bad. This is all done through research, and that's what this course is going to do. It's going to make you think critically and think about research and become a consumer of research and a practitioner. That means conducting your own research. So you're not going to be like a full-fledged researcher after this course, but it's going to get you an idea of what research is, how to interpret it, how to analyze it, and that's going to be a very useful trait moving forward, both at the 4-year college and eventually in any kind of career that you engage in.